Beautiful. Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Llewellyn Saunders with the Access Accelerator Small Business Development Center. Tonight's presentation, we will cover topics for the funding options and funding process here at the Access Accelerator. Bria DeVoe and Felice Bethel will represent the funding department and provide that information for you. Just a matter of information, we will be recording this session for those that were unable to participate tonight who registered, and so they will receive a copy of this recording. Please ensure that you
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for the introduction, Llewellyn. Let me turn my camera on for you guys to see. So I'm Bria DeVoe. I'm one portion of the funding department. We'll be joined shortly by Felice Bethel, who is the head of the funding department. If everyone can see the presentation, can you type in the chat, please? Okay, great. Thank you. So thank you all for joining. Welcome to this funding process presentation. So to get started, I'm not sure, I see some people saying that they couldn't hear Ms. Saunders speaking when she was talking. So a little bit about what she was saying was that this is a presentation to describe the funding process. It's also, this will be recorded. So just to let you know, this will be a recorded session for clients who could not meet the time to join. So they'll have an opportunity to speak and hear the session while it's finished. And please ask any of your questions in the questions section that will be on the left-hand bar of your screen so that we can collect them and answer any questions at the end. And I will get started. So good evening. And we will start this. So the beginning portion is, so a little bit about the funding department. Hi, everybody. Can you hear me now? Okay, great. Sorry about that. So we'll begin with talking a little bit about the entire funding process on the whole. So in order to make it to the funding process, you have to start off with doing a couple of prep steps before. So like you all may know, because I see a lot of people asking questions about the standalone grant and other SBDC programs, you have to create a Zoho user account. Zoho is our customer relationship management software where we are able to manage everything that you go through, see everything that happens. We're able to see where you might have fallen short in an example. You're able to upload all the documentation that's needed. And so that talks a little bit about here. So you upload personal and business documents. You're able to take the aptitude test that's required for us to begin working with you. Actually, I believe that Felice Bethel has joined. Felice, are you here? Yes, we can hear you great.
Yes, can you hear me? Okay, so sorry everyone, I was having technical issues. So I'll just take over where Bria was. So this the third step is where you take these aptitude tests, and then the results of the tests are used to determine the areas of training and the extent of training you need to become more knowledgeable um, and successful as an entrepreneur. And so then the fourth step is where you complete the virtual training courses before you write, rewrite, tweak, and submit your business plan for the first official independent review. And then once your plan is reviewed, you will receive feedback, which may be a list of recommended revisions to strengthen your business plan. Or you may find out on the first try that you're ready for more intense scrutiny by the credit committee. And so the seventh step can be a bit nerve wracking for the average entrepreneur because this is where you pitch and defend your business plan in our version of Dragon's Den or Shark Tank. So, 7 steps before the funding process begins. Now, Bria, I think you're still sharing the screen and you can continue. Can you take? Okay, good. So, in a previous webinar, we discussed the 3 funding options for clients, which are grant, debt, and equity. So, when we're talking about the funding process, we're talking about a process that involves approvals and disbursements of grants, loans, and equity. Um, the approvals function involves our internal board of directors. We can go to the next slide and external financial institutions. Then, as Bria, who you've met already, will discuss, the disbursement function involves our internal accounts department and the external financial institutions. So, if we look under the approval process, you'll see that the board of directors is responsible for approving the grants, lenders responsible for the loans, investors for equity. Under disbursements, the accounts department is the one that executes the grants, lenders execute the disbursements of the loans, and the investors will obviously execute any equity disbursements. Okay. So, under the approval function, which I will focus on, there are 5 main tasks. And these tasks, or the approval function, is initiated by the credit committee letter. If you go to that, now we don't have time to read the letter verbatim, but you need to be clear on what this letter is saying. And I just need to emphasize that for some clients, there's a lot of misinterpretation of what this letter says and what it does. So it approves the business plan that was scrutinized by the credit committee. It confirms the total funding amount based on the use of funds section in your business plan. It splits the total funding amount between grant, debt, and or equity based on your preference, and it assures lenders that Access Accelerator will guarantee 75% of the loan principal up to $500,000. Now, based on the credit committee strong review and the 75% guarantee, the credit committee letter highly recommends the board of directors and financial institutions approve your funding request. I underlined the word recommends because I want to emphasize that the credit committee letter is not a loan or investment offer letter. The loan or investment offer letter has to come from the bank or the investment group once they review your application and decide that you meet their criteria. So if somebody writes an employment recommendation letter for you, vouching for your experience, work ethics, trustworthiness, you clearly understand the employment recommendation letter is not an employment or job offer letter. The company you're applying to is the one that has to actually review the job application, consider the recommendation letter they received, and then decide to either issue a job offer letter or pass on your application. So the credit committee letter is not a loan or investment offer letter. But still, what is the weight of this credit committee letter? What weight does this recommendation hold? We can go to the next one. So, of the total grants, loans, and investments recommended by the credit committee to date, if you had to guess, what percentage you think was actually approved by the board of directors and financial institutions? And you have four choices. You think it's 45%, 20%, 65%, or 80%. So, actually, to date, more than 80% of the total grants, loans, and equity funding recommended by the credit committee have been approved by our board of directors and our funding partners. So, that's a very high approval rate. Next slide. So, once the credit committee letter is issued, our internal funding department will verify that you've provided all of the personal and business documents that we need to forward either to the bank or investment groups. And we have multiple banks that we send your paperwork to. And the thing is, maybe you submitted your documents weeks or months ago. So we need to verify that all the documents are still current. So your driver's license hasn't expired, or we're not forwarding a 2020 business license because you've, gotten your 2021 business license already. So then and so on the screen, you have a list of the documents that we check for. And you can quickly scroll through things that's pretty standard: passport photo page, national insurance card, driver's license, voter's card. When we look under the business side, we're looking for your business license. If you're incorporated, we want the incorporation documents. If you have a lease agreement, letters of intent, government contracts, whatever documentation that is going to solidify your application, those are the things that we go for. Okay, next, please. Okay, so within 3 to 5 days, business days, of course, after you receive the credit committee letter, you can expect an email from the funding department basically requesting a virtual meeting with you for about 30 minutes. And there are a number of reasons why we want to have this introductory meeting. The most important reason is that we want to establish a direct point of contact for you with the funding department. So, what this means is that previously, a lot of your communications happened between you and your advisor, but your advisor is not authorized to instruct us how your funding is to be used or dispersed, or how the structure should change. Those instructions have to come directly from you in writing and not verbally through your advisor. Another reason for the meeting is that we want to request any missing and updated documents that need to be forwarded to the bank. As well, we want to explain the funding process for you from start to finish and answer any questions or concerns you may have. Okay. And so then we go to the grant approval step, which is number 4 of my 5 steps. So we're moving pretty fast. So once we're on the same page, the funding department will submit your grant application to the board of directors. And when we're talking about government grants, we have to acknowledge that there are multiple grants. I don't know which ones you've heard of. Maybe the standalone grant, over the hill grant, preschool, fishing and farming, technical grant. But for this presentation, we're specifically talking about the matching grant. We'll have another webinar where we focus specifically on the standalone round 3 grant program and other upcoming grants. So once we submit your application to the board, and we submit them to 5 members, they are going to vote on your application. And the thing is, So let me explain first what a matching grant is. So the term matching grant is used because let's say you want $30,000 in funding. If that is split between a $15,000 loan and a $15,000 grant, that's where you get the name, the matching grant. Now, the $15,000 loan, you have to repay. The grant, you don't have to repay. So the fact that you don't have to repay this money, the approval process for that grant has to be very strict and fair. And so what we do is we submit it to the board of directors who have no previous working relationship with the applicant. And so there's no personal bias as to, okay, I'm going to go ahead and give this to this entrepreneur because I like him more than I like the other entrepreneur. And so I surveyed the board of directors yesterday and asked them, if you go to the next slide, Bria, what factors weigh in their decision making? What are the top factors? And so I gave them actually 13 factors to choose from. And it's listed on the screen: business viability, historical financials are there, existing loans that you may have, management expertise. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see that all four of the directors who participated chose the same top three factors. For them, what's most important is business viability. And that's not just a fancy term. What that means is that your business is likely to be profitable and sustainable, plain and simple. And then they're interested in whether or not your projections are realistic. A lot of times people are overly ambitious, overstating their sales, understating their costs. And then the board is like, I'm not sure about this. So they're really concerned that your projections are conservative and realistic. Then the third point is management expertise. Do you have the skill set to actually properly um, manage the business that you're trying to get into? So if we go to the next one. And so actually, let's go back. So what happens is that in order for your grant application to be approved, you need 2 board members to vote yes. And based on these 3 factors, you know what things you need to demonstrate in order to get that yes vote. And of course, we will notify you once the board has voted on your grant application. So the next step, final step in the approval process involves us sending your documents, including the business plan, your personal documents, your business documents, business license, all those things. We're going to send those to multiple funding institutions so that they can approve either your debt or equity funding request. So I did the same things with the lenders and investors. I asked them, what are the top factors that weigh in your decision? And so, interestingly enough, they came back with, they agreed on 5 things. 2 of them are the same as the board of directors, and I have them highlighted. Business viability was also important to the financial institutions, and management expertise. But also, you see, they are more interested in historical financials than they were necessarily interested in realistic projections. They wanted to see what your track record has been. Another focus on the past is their focus on your credit history, both the business and the person. They're also interested in how much skin you have in the game. You say that you're passionate about this business, but how much of your personal money are you willing to risk on this new business? So those are the things that weigh in their decision-making process. And if you want to have multiple approvals so that you're in a position to negotiate the best terms, these are the things that you need to demonstrate in your funding application. So I just want to quickly recap the approval process. There are 5 steps. The credit committee letter is issued. We verify your documents, both business and personal documents, and then we request a meeting with you. And this introductory meeting is again to establish this direct line of communication, because any authorizations about your money, whether it's 10 cents, $10, $10,000, has to come directly from you. And then there's the matching grant request, and then the loan and investment request. So now I'll hand it over to Bria, because once you're
Thank you so
approved,
much, Felice.
now you're
That was
ready
a really
for
good
disbursements.
explanation of the approval process, and I'll take it from here, where we begin the payment process, also known as the disbursement process that Felice described earlier. So there are three main steps in the payment and disbursement process of funds. And essentially, this starts right after your loan is approved by the financial institution. So to begin, the main steps in the process are invoices, wire forms, and disbursement of funds. I will go in depth in each section of these, in each step, to describe what each step entails. So to start off, we have invoices. This is just an example of an invoice on the left. But the purpose of this is to get some general information out, is that we do not disperse funds directly to the business. So you, as the business owner, your bank account. We ensure that clients, so you entrepreneurs, send vendor invoices that match the use of funds section of your business plan. So a little bit about that. So the use of funds section of your business plan is a part that in kind of outlines all of the items that you want to spend money on that were approved by both the financial institution and the grant committee. So let's say you wanted to purchase you're a bakery and you want to purchase a stove, since that's an example we're going to use later. We would want you to outline that in your business plan, and all of your financial projections and all of the arguments that you make in your business plan will be able to adjust in there. Give me 1 second. I'm going to turn my camera on because I let you know you guys cannot see me. Okay, so I believe you should be able to see me now. Okay, great. So this is, you're able to,
Yes.
so with the use of funds, you're able to make a case as to why you need to spend that funding on the approved items. And so when you send us your vendor invoices, we're able to match those to what was approved. Another portion of the invoices is they must be on a vendor letterhead. So if you're buying from Kelly's, we want to see that the invoice has Kelly's as the letterhead, and it's all branded underneath that company's logo. Another thing that's important is that our vendors that you're providing invoices for must have a business license and a business bank account. So this essentially means that we're paying actual businesses. And that comes along with providing why information, which we will discuss later. But also in there, that means businesses, since we're sending information to business bank accounts, we do not accept credit card payments, cash payments, or check payments. We have to have wire instructions that come from the vendors. And we will discuss that a little bit more in the wire forms. But that's just an overall of what we expect from each invoice. And so there's obviously times where these stray from what this needs to be. And so the most common ones that you see, I will describe them. So we have the first one is rent and lease payments. So when you have your use of funds, sometimes you can have operating expenses that are approved. Because you're a business, you might be a startup, you are just starting up. So you might need to rent office space or manufacturing building or whatever comes along with your business. So with this, obviously you wouldn't have a vendor invoice for these, but you would be required to provide the lease agreement that's associated with whatever area that you are in. So that lease agreement would have to be signed by both you, the business owners, and the landlord of the complex. And the lease agreement must include the address of the office, the monthly rent, and the duration of the lease. And this just allows us to pay the vendor directly and to know where exactly the funds are being used. Another common one that deserves mention is payroll. So this falls underneath operational expenses also. And a lot of times we have clients that need help with making payroll. And just like we talked about vendors like Kelly's and these other businesses, you can consider your employee that you would be paying payroll for as your vendor. So you would have for each employee, you need to supply an employment letter signed by you, the business owner, and the employee that's being paid. So if you have 5 employees that you want to be paid, you would have to have an individual employment letter on your company's letterhead that describes both, that has the signatures of both you and the employee. And then one of the following NIB contribution sheet or a previous pay stub. That allows us to just verify that the person is actually an employee with your business and we're making payments to the correct person. And the third one that seems to come up frequently in this is any sort of service that's being built. So you can think of it as construction sites, websites, app development, even leasehold improvements like painting, tiling, things along that line. So, if you've ever worked with anything along these lines, there's usually a deposit payment structure of some sort. For the most part, especially for digital tools like websites and apps, it's a 50% deposit before you begin your service, before you begin service with them. And then once you're happy with the item, once you're ready to move forward, you can pay the remaining 50%. The Access Accelerator goes with that same process. So we wouldn't want to pay for a website upfront because it protects both you and us. If if the vendor ghosts you or doesn't speak to you after that, then it allows you to still have a bumper to move around and assist and find another vendor that would be able to fulfill the request. And then for construction work, we realize that construction has 2 phases. There's materials and then there's labor. So obviously, we pay for 100% of the materials up front so that the construction workers and their teams can get started on stuff. But we would also just be paying 50% of the labor to start. And when the whatever construction, leasehold improvements, whatever it is that's being done is nearly complete, we would pay the remaining 50% to satisfy the balance. So keeping that in mind, all invoices should be broken down to reflect that. So if you're working with a construction company, if they're providing you with the materials, if they're buying everything for you, you should have them break down on the invoice a list of what would be materials and then what's the labor cost so that we can see that on our end, we're paying the right amount. So the next step would be a wire form. So wire forms come along with invoices. Wire forms are something, like we mentioned earlier, that we're able to pay vendors strictly from wire and banking information. So this is where you're able to write that information down and explain to your lender or the internal SBDC disbursement team that exactly what you want to be paid. Sorry about that. And so this is on your left, you'll see that this is an example of what a wire transfer form looks like. At the top, you have your client information, and the next section, you have the beneficiary or vendor information. And the bottom section is just for our internal accounts and disbursements team to do the job that they need to do to make sure that the transaction is going to go through. So I'll break down each section here. So the first portion that we spoke about is the client information. And I used me as an example so that you can see what a completed form would look like. And so this information is your information as the business owner. You would write your name, your business name, the reason for the purchase, your email, and your telephone number. And this information should match which was on your business plan and which you applied to the Access Accelerator with. So for me, I have a bakery, like we said, we'll use that as an example going forward. I want to buy an industrial stove, so I'm using that for my kitchen equipment, and I would have had kitchen equipment written down in my use of funds section. And this is the email and telephone that I'll be able to be reached on quickly and without any sort of back and forth. We want this, if there's any questions that come up between your funds being dispersed, we want whoever's dealing with your account to be able to reach you as soon as possible. So I always recommend putting the best contact information for you up there. So this form, this beginning part of your client information will not change from section to section. This from form to form. This will stay the same throughout your entire relationship with the SBDC. The next section that you would be worried about is your beneficiary information. So the beneficiary is your vendor, the person that's benefiting from getting the funds, dispersed to them. So in this case, you would put all of the information that matches what was on the invoice on the beneficiary information section. So in my case, I was buying the industrial stove from Bahamas Kitchen Equipment Store. These are all made up things, just so everybody knows. And this exact information would be on my invoice. And I would just write it out and make sure that everything checks out and it is all good. So you would write the amount, your beneficiary's name, the beneficiary's address. So the beneficiary address means that this 23 Carmichael Road is where the Bahamas Kitchen Equipment Store is located. And then you would move on to the banking information. So this is the actual wire information that the vendor would have supplied to you when you seeked the invoice. So Bahamas Kitchen Equipment Store, their banking and wire information, they bank with Scotiabank. At the main branch, their bank account number, as it says there, and then their local bank transit number, which is usually the branch number, as we know, more commonly know, is what we have here, the 6-digit number we have here. So as you can see on this wire form, that the information here, you're able to have international wires. So that's something I forgot to mention in the beginning, but we don't restrict you just to wires in the Bahamas. You're able to purchase from other companies, but you just have to make sure that they have wire information. And once you get that wire information, international banking, you have to put the international banking routing number and the SWIFT code. And those things are normally labeled on the business's invoice. Another thing to take note is that the wire form must be signed and dated by you in order to be executed. We cannot execute any payments if we don't feel like it was written by you, the client. And the last thing to take note is right at the bottom of the wire form, it explains that there are wire fees associated with each payment. So for local wire transfers, it can range from anywhere between $6 to $11. And for international wires, it can be 5% of your invoice amount. And that is your responsibility as the client to pay. So you would have to keep that in mind when calculating your invoices that you're sending in. So to recap a little bit about the wire forms, your vendor must have a business bank account. So you could even ask the question if it is a business bank account. Just asking them upfront when you get the invoice. To know if it's a business bank account, they normally have it in the business name, and that's a good way to know that it's there. A wire form must be completed for every single vendor. So if you're using Kelly's, Commonwealth Building Supplies, and Super Value, a wire form has to be completed for each of those payments, so that we know who we're paying what amount to. The beneficiary name and address for the bank account must match what's on the invoice. So many times, companies provide their banking information on the invoice. We will be able to just check the invoice to make sure that banking information is correct. If the banking information is correct, the payment won't be processed and it will extend the time for your disbursements to go through. Ensure that you sign and date the wire form so that we know that it was you who made that, who executed the payment. And then the last thing is about the wires. So $6 to $11 for local wire fees and 5% of the invoice amount for international wire fees. So we'll move on to the last section of this, of the payment process. I know it's been a long process, but we're finally here to the end where you actually get the funds and get your equipment. So once all of the invoices and wire forms are received and they look good, we've gone through the process of determining that they match the use of funds, they're all correct, they're signed. We send the loan portion of your wire forms to your financial institution that was approved in the approval process. So the financial institution will execute all loan payments. And like Felice said earlier, the Access Accelerator will execute all grant payments. So those things will be split. If you only have a loan, all invoices and wire forms will go to the bank, to the financial institution that you were approved with. But if you have a split amount, you would be able to have partial loan and partial grant funds split between your financial institution and the Access Accelerator. Once those payments are made, whomever between the Access Accelerator and your financial institution you'll be alerted by them to then go and either obtain your website or the service or the item that you purchased. And that's essentially the end of your funding process. Just to recap the payment process, you would ensure invoices are valid prior to submission. You would complete wire forms for each vendor. You want to make sure vendors accept wire information. So no credit card payments, no cash payments, and no check payments. So that includes companies like Amazon. Amazon does not allow you to wire information. So you would have to find other vendors. And then you would submit all of your invoices and wire forms in one email to the funding department representative, and then your funds would go along to be paid to the financial institutions or the internal grant disbursement team. And that is all we have for the funding presentation. I know we have some time for questions, so we will look at what the questions that were asked in the chat.
So Bria, while you were presenting, I started to answer some of the questions. So I went through, and so I don't know if anybody wants to type any new. I think there were some new questions that came up about the disbursement process. So Soretta is asking if the invoice is more than the standalone grant amount, would I be eliminated? So I guess you could clarify that we're not talking
So, like Felice
about the
said, this is for
standalone
our
grant,
regular
but I guess
Access
you could
Accelerator
answer this
SBEC
question.
program. So the standalone grant is a completely different program, and there will be a webinar in the future discussing all the ins and outs of the standalone grant. But if you have one invoice that exceeds the amount that you have approved for, we would just ask you if that's something. We would have to get a verbal from you that you would be able to make up the remainder of the payment, and we would go from there. For the standalone grant, I'm not entirely sure what that process looks like if your invoice exceeds the amount of your approval.
Okay, so Sterling Simonet is saying that there's a challenge in obtaining government contracts and vendor invoices in farming. Have you run into that issue with some clients, obviously, who've been funded in that industry?
So I
Was
can't
it a
speak to
challenge
government
also for
contracts, but
them
I can
to
speak to
get
invoices because this is
invoices?
the funding aspect of stuff. I have never had an issue with farmers or people in farming and fishing having a problem obtaining invoices. You would just reach out to the person that you are working with at wherever you're getting these materials from, to gather the invoice and work together to see what that would look like from their end.
And so somebody is asking, timing is everything. Brandon Hall asked, from the
Thank you,
creation
Brandon.
of
I
the
realized when I
Zoho
finished the
account to the
presentation that I forgot
disbursement
to
of
mention that.
funds, how long
So
is this
this process
overall
can take
process?
from creating the Zoho account till now, I can't speak to that process because that process is determined on the beginning process. Like Felice mentioned, there are steps before you get to the funding process. So that's determining on your speed of taking the classes, your ability to complete the business plan, the internal adjudication and credit committee meeting. So I can't speak to that portion. That portion is dependent on many other things outside of the funding department. But from your approval date and verification of your documents until your funding date, that can take between 4 to 6 weeks, depending on the back and forth that we need to have. If there are outstanding documents, if we can't get all of the wire forms and invoices in one time, those vary between 4 and 6 weeks. But prior to the funding department, I cannot speak to how long that takes. It's dependent on a lot of factors there.
Right. And a lot of times, too, even after a client is approved by the credit committee, so let's say you finally get your business plan approved, a lot of times when we ask for invoices and wire instructions, there's often this delay because clients sometimes change their mind in terms of what they want to purchase, the vendor they want to purchase it from. And so there's a lot of chasing and back and forth to finally get the client completely funded. So there's a responsibility during the funding process that is shared between the client and SBDC, and obviously the external funding institutions. But once you provide all the documentation we need, usually you can be funded, disbursed in a reasonable period of time. And that time depends on you. I've had a client who started the same time as her aunt, and I think she went through the process in maybe about a few months, and her aunt was still stuck at the taking the classes, writing the business plan phase. So it really depends on how hungry are you for this opportunity, and are you willing to do the work to get things done, because there are thousands of you, maybe 9,000 of you, and so yes, we're here to assist you, but a lot of the heavy lifting you're still going to have to do in order to push your
So another
business plan
question I
forward.
see is, do we complete repayment of the loan through the SBDC from DeMarco Mott? So no, the loan is paid. Like Felice mentioned in the beginning, there's a funding approval process where your approved loan application is sent to a number of financial institutions. Once one of those financial institutions approve, or a number of them, you will then be able to execute a loan offer letter and promissory note with that financial institution. So the Access Accelerator is not a financial institution. It's not a bank. So you would make all loan payments to the financial institution that you sign your promissory note with. So sorry, I'm trying to read the question section, but it's moving because everyone's asking a lot of questions. What is,
So somebody asked, is there a maximum amount of grant offered? It depends on what grant you're talking about. So tonight we're talking about matching grants. So the maximum amount of a matching grant is 20,000. But the rule for the matching grant is that it cannot exceed 50% of the total funding you're requesting. So let's say the total funding you're requesting is $30,000. You won't be approved for a matching grant of $20,000. So the 50% value of the 30,000 is 15,000. So you're eligible for the 15,000. So it depends on if you're requesting $40,000 or more, the maximum amount is 20,000. If you're requesting less than that, then the
So
maximum amount is
another
50% of what you're
question is, what
asking
is the
for.
PSOA? So a PSOA is a personal statement of affairs, which is essentially a banking application. So this is where you would explain all your personal information, so who you are, where you live, your contact information, but more importantly to that, you would be able to describe any outstanding debt that you have, any assets that you have, any delinquencies that you have, which is very important to us who approve clients to go to financial institutions. We would want to know what your current exposure is as a client. And we provide a template for a PSOA. So it's not something that you have to format yourself. That's something that you would be provided with once you sign up through the portal.
I think that's about it. I don't know. I don't see. So I'm not sure, Llewellyn, if you've seen this question. Is there a way that participants or the audience can get tonight's slide? Do we have?
Yes, there will be a way that you can get tonight's slides. I know that we're recording this also, so you would be able to access
Okay.
this somehow, and I'm sure the information will be sent after the session is finished. So another question I see, what grants and loans are available now, and how do I apply if I'm already on the SBDC portal? So what we're talking about today is a regular program, and that is a rolling program. So that's the matching grant plus loan or plus debt or equity funding. You can apply to that through at any time. And the other programs that are available right now, please can you speak to the grant programs that we have open at the moment?
Well, I think Llewellyn is the best person to speak on the grant programs that are currently open because these are Llewellyn's projects. Llewellyn, can you jump in and say what's
Hi, good
happening
night.
now with fishing
So,
and farming
like I've
grant?
been
I know we
messaging
have an
persons on the chat, if
upcoming
you visit our website,
standalone round three, but we really don't want to
www.accessaccelerator.org, and you select the
sidetrack too much
programs
because we're going
tab,
to have
it
another
will give you
webinar that
all of the
focuses
open and
on all
available
these other
programs that we have.
programs. But
Right now,
Llewellyn,
we have the farming and fishing program, the disaster recovery program for Abaco and GB and Grand Bahama clients, the regular Access Accelerator program, as well as some upcoming grant programs that will be announced on our website and social media pages.
another question for you, Llewellyn. Somebody's asking, what happens when you did everything required and still didn't get the
Sure.
standalone
So,
grant? It seems like a
just
lot of people didn't
a
get
quick bit of
this
information. We
grant. So
had
maybe explain how
almost 2,000
popular
applicants in
these
round
grant
two
programs
of
are and
the
why it's
standalone
important for
grant.
people
And
to
then
apply
in
early.
round one of the standalone grant, we had over 800 applicants. So, being mindful that we've only been able to access $1.7 million for both of these programs, both rounds of these programs, we definitely have an issue where we have a lot of persons who meet the minimum requirements who are just unable to access the programs because of a number of criteria that we've set. So we look at things like the industry that you're in, we look at whether you're a startup or an existing business. We also look at aspects like your previous gross revenues, net profits. We also look at things like the number of employees that you have. So all of those things are taken into consideration when making these very tough decisions. And we would love to assist and fund as many people as we can, but we have to be mindful and look at things like, as Felice mentioned earlier, the viability. So we could split the money down to all of the persons who have met the minimum requirements, but that amount of money may not be sufficient to take your business to where you need it to be. So you're requesting $5,000, and we said that you'll be approved for 500, may not be the best um, option for you. So we've had to make some very tough decisions. And in some instances, we've not been able to give the specifics of that denial or rejection simply because we've just had so many applicants for both um, rounds of the standalone grant. And I expect the same to occur when we open round three in the upcoming weeks. So I hope that this assists in persons understanding more clearly as to what happened in both rounds, being mindful that we have had to make difficult decisions. It's a program that an initiative, sorry, that we've partnered with the University of the Bahamas. We've partnered with the Venture Fund, and we've partnered with Chamber to assist us in making these most difficult decisions, being mindful of the current economic climate, as well as being mindful of the saturation of certain industries, the size of businesses, et cetera.
Thank you.
I just saw another question for you, Bria. What if your vendor is
Yes.
abroad?
So like
Are you able
we
to
mentioned with the
process
wire
payments
forms, you have
to
ability
international
to
vendors?
put any information for any vendor worldwide. They just require to have the same checks and balances that they have they have wire information, they accept wire payments. And you would have to pay the 5% wire fees. So yes, international vendors are fine. Once we can verify that it's a legitimate business and that they have a legitimate invoice and legitimate products, you can use international vendors. Um, so I see a question from Miss Smith. Is there continued mentorship provided for persons with the SBDC during and after funding is provided? So there is. You would be after you go to the funding department, after you go through funding and you get all your funds dispersed, there is a post-funding department where you're able to receive developmental help for a 3-year relationship underneath the regular program. So the developmental help differs between which program you're in and the amount of funding. So underneath this regular program with matching grant, you would have a 3-year relationship where you're able to receive developmental help, whether that be mentorship, classes, webinars similar to this, or as the program grows, we'll be able to grow with it.
Okay. So somebody is asking for the website again. It's www.accessaccelerator.org. I'll just drop it in the chat.
How safe is it sending plans and information to different institutions? Does NDA signed during in-person training cover these institutions? Felice, can you speak to that for the NDA for in-person training? Mhm.
Yes. So now, when you say in-person training, because right now we're doing virtual training, so I just needed to clarify, are you talking about in the past? Because currently we're not doing any face-to-face training, but yes, we do have non-disclosure agreements in place that both employees have to sign off on, clients. Even we sign NDA agreements with our financial institutions that whatever documents that we provide to them, they are to be safeguarded. And even, so the privacy, your privacy or your personal identification, all these things are protected from the start of the process. I think in Zoho, the clients have the ability to sign this NDA agreement.
Ms. Baz, I see, is the entire process virtual from start to finish? Currently, yes, because of our current pandemic.
So somebody is asking how to get started. So when you go to our website, which we've already posted in the chat, you simply click on Join Now. Now, I see somebody saying that they've finished their business proposal in Live Plan. But did you actually submit your business plan through our Zoho, or upload your business plan in Zoho and submitted it for review? So it's one thing to complete it, but then you
Another
have to take
question
the
I
next
see
step to
is, for
submit it.
startups, is a business license a must at submission? Yes. So we cannot disperse funds to businesses that don't exist per se. So we must, in our due diligence, have a business license on file for the business. So yeah. I would tell them that they should
So,
log
Bray, what
on
would
to
you
the
say to
website
somebody who says
that
they've never
Llewellyn
heard of
just dropped in
Zoho?
the chat. And you would be able to see the Zoho portal link. I'm not sure where on the website because I have the presentation up. I don't have the website up right now. And Zoho is essentially a customer relationship management software and a portal that we're able to interact with you on. So if you begin the process and you go through all of the information about uploading documentation, you go through the classes that are housed on Zoho, they're digital classes that are on Zoho, you take the aptitude test, you go through the process, we're able to step through the process with you. And you're able to have, and it's immediate help. So instead of having to email an advisor and wait for a response, you're able to email the help desk, work through your problems through Zoho, and work through the entire process. So from start to finish, all information that you worked with the Access Accelerator would be on Zoho. And I see some people saying this is their first time hearing of and using Zoho. Yes, it's a newer thing that we implemented in the beginning of 2020, around during the start of the pandemic. And so it was something that we could engage our clients throughout this process. So if it's your first time, you should just log on and try and work through it. And if there are questions, you should contact the help desk that's at the bottom of the Zoho platform.
So I see another question here. If you were denied for the standalone grant before, are you able to apply again? Certainly, you can apply again.
Hi. So, in relation to the standalone grant, and I'm going to try and
There's
answer
a
as many
question about
questions as I
if you were
can
approved for the
about the
standalone
standalone grant,
grant
because
more
the
than
session for the
once.
standalone will be held on Monday.
Are you able to be
But
approved for the standalone grant more
for
than
the
once?
standalone grant and any standalone funding that you receive through us, you are not eligible to apply for any other program unless it's the farming and fishing program to date. So what you must do is read carefully the eligibility requirements of any program or initiative that you sign up for. Specifically for the standalone grant, you are not allowed to access funding more than once. If you've been approved in round one or round two, then you're not eligible to receive any other standalone grant unless explicitly stated in the eligibility requirements of that particular initiative. There are a lot of questions still, even though I've mentioned the reasons why persons were denied, and I will reiterate again. The number of the reasons, specifically the biggest reason why persons were not approved in either round one or round two of the standalone grant is simply budgetary constraint. Because if you're thinking about it, 1,800 people requesting $5,000 far exceeds the $700,000 that we allotted for this program. And as I mentioned before, it was an arduous task going through and identifying based on the criteria set by the approval committee. So it is not an instance where we do not want to assist. We have decided to create a number of initiatives and programs in the upcoming months and weeks. However, in these particular initiatives, we've had to be extremely um, mindful as to how we allocate the funding such that we're spreading it across gender, across island, across industry, across type of business status, meaning startup or existing. So I don't want persons to take things personally as if we have some vendetta against you. I don't want people to think that there's some collusion or corruption going on. I just want you to be mindful of the reality of what is happening. There are a number of micro, small, and medium enterprises in the Bahamas who have their business license, who are Bahamian, who have all of the requirements that we've asked. And so we've had to we've had to do our due diligence in determining how we would allocate the funding in round one, round two, and we will have to do the same thing in round three, as well as we'll have to do the same thing with all of the initiatives and programs that we have that we will launch through the Access Accelerator, simply because we have an interest. And I mentioned this last year when I was interviewed. Bahamians are extremely industrious. We are a people who are looking to provide, to be resourceful. We want to um, not be so much on government assistance, and we would like to own our own businesses. We applaud you and we appreciate that. However, there's a particular reality in terms of the funding available, which is why this session here is to talk about the steps so that you are aware of how long things take, to be mindful of that. It is not a tomorrow process. So in the meantime, you must work while you wait. So yes, you may get a no today, you may get a no tomorrow, but we would like you to continue to work hard so that when the opportunity presents itself, you are able to access funding if it becomes available, and access the training and mentorship and advisory services that we also offer here at the Access Accelerator.
Thank you, Llewellyn. Yes, that was very good overview of the standalone grant program. And I still see people confused about Zoho. So Zoho, you can access it on our site, but there is, to actually get on Zoho, if you already have a login information for Zoho, you can access the portal on our website. If you've never accessed Zoho before and you're a new client, you would have to sign up on the Join Us section of our website, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. This would add you to a list that you would then get a Zoho invite for. But if you've already been on Zoho and you aren't moving through the process, I believe that you can submit a help center ticket and they will get back to you as soon as they can. Anyone can let me know if that was correct. I think that would be there will be separate webinars for all programming, but I believe that is all that all the questions I see for this evening. like we said earlier, this will be you'll be able to access this on a future date, and we've recorded this if you need to see any information. Hopefully we were able to answer all of your questions this evening and you have a better understanding of the funding process. And you would be equipped to go through the process once you get here. So thank you all for joining us this evening.
And all of your questions are valid. I like the fact that you want more information. What I would also encourage you to do is follow us on our social media pages, because we're always updating clients on what's happening, what are the opportunities that you need to grab up. And the thing is, sometimes clients, I don't know, for whatever reason, the general public finds out about these opportunities before you do, because you're not necessarily tuned in to what's happening on our pages and what's being updated on our website. So definitely stay in contact with us through all of the means that are available, and we welcome your questions. We're looking forward to future webinars. Like Llewellyn said, the standalone grant webinar will be on Monday. And so, yes, we will definitely be hosting more informative sessions for you. And we hope that you walk away tonight with a lot of information that can help you make good decisions for your funding.
Okay, great.
I think that's it. Okay, good night, everyone.